7:03. So let's get started. Welcome, everyone. We thank you all for coming. Thank you for coming to this session of our It Takes a Village series. We will be, it will be, excuse me, with human trafficking. And before we get started, we will have greetings from our Madam President, Soror Bridget Williams.
Great evening, everyone, and a warm and hearty welcome to each of you for joining us this evening for this insightful discussion on human trafficking in our community. We are delighted to have you here as we embark on this journey to explore more about this troubling world and its implications in our rapidly evolving society. Whether you are here tonight just out of curiosity, there is a professional interest that you may have, or a desire to just stay informed about the latest things that are happening within our community, we are confident that you will find this session to be both informative and thought-provoking. Thank you so much to our speaker, Hannah Arrowood, and our moderators, Sora Lachelle Setzer Mullins and Sora Makisha Griffin. And a very special thanks to our Program Planning and Development Committee for another session of It Takes a Village. We encourage each of you to actively participate tonight. Ask your questions in the chat, ask your questions when the opportunity opens, but stay engaged in this discussion to make the most of this learning opportunity. Again, thank you so very much for choosing to be a part of tonight's discussion.
Thank you, Madam President. You got me excited. I was already excited. Now I'm even more excited with our speaker. Did you all know that this month was Human Trafficking Month? I did not know that. I just learned it doing our research for this program. So tonight we have a subject matter expert to share with us some more information about human trafficking. We have Hannah Arrowood, who is the founder and executive director of Present Age Ministries. She is also part of the Charlotte Metro Human Trafficking Task Force. That's a mouthful. And I think she's also a part of Cabarrus County Task Force as well. So Hannah will have a wealth of information for us. Please feel free to put questions you have in the chat. We will also have a Q&A session. So if you want to come off of mute, you can do that when the time comes. And we will be watching the chat. And take it away, Hannah. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to join tonight. And I hope to give you information. If it's not new information, hopefully it resonates in a deeper way with you tonight as we walk through just this issue of human trafficking. As it's already been said, this is my life and my world all day, every day. And so not only do I lead an organization, I'll tell you a little bit about the organization as we go throughout the presentation, just so you have a little bit of context about what it is that we do. But I also am the president of the Charlotte Metro Human Trafficking Task Force. The task force was originally instituted by a mandate by Congress, and it was originally housed within the U.S. Attorney's Office. But now that the task force has become our own unique 501c3, so that we really could navigate, spearhead, and generate funding in order to support the service providers and agencies that are on the ground doing the work. So please know that while I'm sharing and talking to you about human trafficking, and I'll share a little bit about Present Age Ministries, if you have any questions really about when it comes to what's happening in a city when it comes to trafficking, I am a great point of contact. I will be happy to get you wherever is the appropriate place, even if it isn't me. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to figure out how to advance my slides. So here we go. Present Age Ministries is committed to combating the sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking of teen girls. And I'm going to pause for a minute because what I want to just make it very clear from the beginning is that, yes, trafficking can happen to boys, and yes, trafficking can happen to adults. So I will break that down as we go along. But due to the research that we have been able to collect over the years, and due to us understanding this, what is such a complex issue, We have found that here in this region, in the Charlotte metro region, the prevalence is with our young females. And that is where we focus and dedicate our time and our attention. So just know that I might say her or she, but of course it can be interchanged for that, for all ages and on genders. So present age specifically, we work to equip communities to prevent and identify victims while providing a safe place for survivors to transition into independence. And so that looks a lot of different ways, and I'm going to explain to that as we go. So our core programs at present age, we have awareness, our education and advocacy program, which is really this. We have people who are out all over the time, all over the city, all over the place, all times of day, just to help educate people about what is real. And the reason that matters is because so often we see things or we hear something and we take it as fact, even if it isn't. And if we see something is relevant in another city or even in another country, we think that also translates across cities, across states. And sometimes that's simply not the case. So we want to know, what are the warning signs? What are common languages? What are the stats? Is there any way for us to actually understand this problem? And that is one of the things that we really strive to do and do it well. When it comes to prevention, we want to prevent any child from experiencing this. And so as we've learned and as we've gathered information and as we have started to understand trends and patterns and adverse childhood experiences, all of those things, we have put that into curriculum. And there is a requirement within North Carolina by the Department of Instruction and Education, because of Senate Bill 279, students in 7th and 8th grade are required to learn about human trafficking in their health classes if they're a part of a public school. So that in and of itself gives us access and ability to educate our kids. And so how do we help school systems, individual schools, administrations do that and do that effectively? And that is a big, big deal to us. For those of you that may or may not know, but we at present age actually partnered with Cabarrus County Schools. We developed a K-5 curriculum that got rolled out and launched last year in 2023. And we have a middle school curriculum so that it meets these standards, but that it could come from, as Lachelle mentioned, subject matter experts. That is what they call us. Sometimes we don't always feel that way because it's so complex. But we do have present ages in our 15th year. So we have been around a while. We're vetted, we're trusted. People know what they're going to get when they call us. They know that they can bank on us to show up in the ways that we say they are. And that goes a long way in this industry. And then finally, our direct service program. Our survivor support program establishes individualized care, holistic plans for every client that we work with. Not only are we addressing their basic needs, housing, shelter, safety, those things have to be evaluated, but we're also looking at the medical needs, their psychological needs, their relational needs, intellectual, or educational, and the spiritual needs. Each of those categories are individualized. We don't have this strict roadmap that we have to follow because we recognize that every person's experience is unique. Therefore, the needs that they have will also be unique. So while we have a vast menu, if you will, of services that we can pull from in order to support and help that young child, because that's what they are, they're children, transition through this journey of healing, we also recognize that there has to be buy-in and understanding from that child and that family on what that looks like. So when it comes to community connections, Lachelle mentioned some of these already, but we're really involved not only here at the local level, but at a state level as well. We're connected to the trafficking world. And so, and the reason that's so important is because sometimes those that we're serving can cross boundaries. And so we really need to have this united collaborative approach in order to make sure that those that we're serving get the things that they need. And that's really the point. So everybody take a breath. Are you guys ready to dive in? I will tell you, some of the information that we talk about can be a little bit jarring if you haven't heard it before. And it also can be a little bit triggering if you have had any type of trauma, specifically sexual trauma in your past. So I just want to give you that disclosure up front. I am going to be blunt and transparent about what the issue is, but I also want you to know that I recognize the sensitivity to the issue. And we work with people every day who are dealing with this. So take care of yourself as we're talking and as we're going through the presentation. So about the issue, I wish I could see your faces. Maybe you can raise, I think there's little hand emojis on here. I don't know, little hand, raise your hand. But if I were to ask you, how many of you have seen the movie Taken? Most people raise their hands. They've either seen it, they've heard about it. And we've all seen images like this where they're, yes, hey, they worked. I love that. Thank you, guys. Thanks for engaging with me. But this is what I want you to understand. This is what trafficking does not look like. And why is this so important? If we think this is what trafficking looks like, then that's what we're looking for. And we'll miss it right when it's in front of our faces. So if I were to able to survey you guys and ask what your professions were, we may have social workers, we may have teachers, we may have stay-at-home moms, we may have business women. There'd be this wide range. So one of the things that is so vitally important to understand about this issue of trafficking, rarely, I'm not going to say never, because I don't like to use absolutes in this world, because they just rarely does a victim of trafficking self-identify. So I'm going to break down what that means, especially for how do we respond then in a community. But we need to first and foremost know that it doesn't look like this. We're not looking for someone oftentimes that has been kidnapped. That is typically not the way that it happens. Nor are we looking for a white van driving around kidnapping our kids. That doesn't mean there aren't white vans driving around kidnapping somebody. But the reality of it is that in trafficking cases that we have worked very closely with law enforcement, local, state, and federal, I have never had a situation where there was kidnapping involved. So I just want you guys to really from the get-go kind of shift your perspective to recognize this, you see on the screen is not what trafficking looks like in the Charlotte metro area. So then let's break down, why does human trafficking exist? I'm going to define it based on our federal and state laws, but you need to understand as we go into the definition of what trafficking is, that the reason we have human trafficking is because there is a demand for trafficking and there are people that are vulnerable that can be exploited. It's the most simple, basic economic principle that I can explain. Because there is a demand, there is a supply that is provided. So let's get down into the definition. There are two types of trafficking. There is sex trafficking and there is labor trafficking. We have both of these across the state of North Carolina. Within the Charlotte metro region, what we see most often is sex trafficking. If you go out more eastern North Carolina and things of that nature, you will see a higher increase in prevalence of labor trafficking. So we do have both, and it's important to understand that both are happening in North Carolina. So let's define human trafficking. Sex trafficking occurs when someone uses force, fraud, or coercion to cause a commercial sex act with an adult or causes a minor to commit a commercial sex act. So we really need to break this down a little bit. And the first thing that I want to break down is, what is a commercial sex act? A commercial sex act includes any type of what we would consider prostitution, pornography, sexual performance done in exchange of any item of value: drugs, money, shelter, food, or clothes. The reason it's so important to recognize this definition of a commercial sex act is because oftentimes, especially our children, are exploited for things and they would never consider that it was a commercial sex act. Again, if they don't self-identify, those of us that are in society need to know what it looks like, how to respond if we see it. Therefore, we can intervene and interrupt that victimization, even if that means we just made a phone call or we just alerted somebody else and a professional. But I want to break down these three words: force, fraud, and coercion, because that's really, if you will, the method in which the trafficker, the pimp, the perpetrator, we can interchange those words, how he is ensuring compliance. Force is serious, causing serious harm or physical restraint to that person. So this is a kidnapping. This is physically restraining, locking them in a room, beating them up in order to get them to do what they want. They are physically forcing them to do what they are being asked to do. Fraud comes in the method of false promises or deceitful behavior. It's the promise of college. It's the promise of stability in a house. It's the promise of a job. The deception can vary from situation to situation. And usually for a time period, that trafficker or perpetrator is going to make good on his word for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but then it's going to become nothingness for free. And so that will break down and will continue to break down as we go. But coercion is the one that's the hardest to spot, but in my experience, has been the most common. And that is threats of serious harm or physical restraints against a person's will. Oftentimes, the threats of harm are to the victim's family. If you don't do what I'm asking you to do, I'll just make your little sister do it. If you don't do what I'm asking you to do, I'm going to kill your parents. So there's a threat based upon to that person or to the people that they care about that causes them to comply with the trafficker's demands. There's one point that is so very vital for me to point out, and it becomes my soapbox, so I try not to stay on it for too long. But here's what it is. The definition of sex trafficking, both at the federal level and state level, says the distinguishing age matters. So is the victim an adult, 18 years or older, or is the victim a minor, 17, 364 days or younger? Here's what's so important to understand. If a minor is engaged in commercial sex act, by our federal law, they cannot consent to commercial sex. What that means is in no way, shape, or form is there any such thing as child prostitution or survival sex or any of that things. Because if a child is engaging in commercial sex, by definition of our law, it's trafficking. And it's so very important that we recognize that. So if I could have some interaction for a minute, take a look at this map and tell me what you see specifically as it pertains to North Carolina. Does anybody have any observations about what they're seeing on the map? Heavy cluster of red. Yes. Hot spots. Absolutely. Well done, guys. Heavy cluster. Here's what I can tell you. North Carolina, this map is produced by a national hotline called the Polaris Project. They take tips from all over the country. They aggregate the information and they produce these reports for us to be able to review. And it's important to understand that doesn't mean that this is all of the cases that are happening. It's just ones that have been reported to the tip line. So data is a really hard thing when it comes to the world of human trafficking. But currently, as of 2023, North Carolina ranked 9th in the country for prevalence of human trafficking. And I bet you can't guess what city is number 1 in North Carolina. Anybody have any guesses? Why do you think North Carolina ranks as high as it does? And what city do you think has the highest prevalence? Charlotte, 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 Charlotte. Yes. And I love the feedback. Yes, Charlotte is the number 1 city in North Carolina. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So of course, there's the basic principles like population, right? We are a city and we're growing rapidly, but lots of interstates. You can get really anywhere in the country quickly, which also provides just a means for someone who wants to make a lot of money of trafficking, specifically our children. But you also have things like public events that draw a lot of people. We have every major sporting event. We host lots of rallies and political conventions and things like that. And here's the dark side to all of that thriving in a city is that brings a lot of people who are willing to pay money to do horrific and unspeakable things. Of course, not everybody, but you don't need everybody. You just need those few people who are engaging that. And it's important to note that when we look at the map like this, it's representing individual cases of trafficking. That's a person's life whose has been utterly shattered due to the sick demands, sexual demands, oftentimes of people in that area. And that is what we deal with day in and day out. So how does this happen? That's one of the things that we get asked all the time, like, how is this reality? And if it's not happening if there's no white van and people aren't getting kidnapped, then how is this happening? Well, one of the things I also want to point out that's not happening is while we may have a small percentage of people who are being trafficked that are foreign nationals, really everything that I'm talking about today has to do with domestic kiddos, right? And people. What's the number one thing that kids have access to? It's social media. Social media and our gaming systems really provide a thing that if you are over the age of 30, we have a grid for what life was like without technology, whereas this generation just simply does not. And what one generation tolerates, the next will embrace. So now we have kiddos and families that are raising children on technology, which doesn't have to be bad, except we don't always know how to protect our kids on social media and gaming. And when we go to do education in the school systems, we always ask students, how many social media sites do you have? And while you might have a LinkedIn, I have a LinkedIn, I have an Instagram, I have a Facebook, so you guys can go find me there if you ever have questions or want to interact. But the reality is I have one of those on each of the platforms. When you ask kiddos, a lot of them have 4 and 5 on each platform. So you're talking 10 or more accounts that they are managing and navigating. There's the one their parents know about. There's the one that they are doing things in secret about because they don't really want people to know it's them. There's one, and it just goes on from there. So traffickers know that, and people who want to groom our children know that. So social media and gaming becomes such a gateway for traffickers to create what is a false sense of bonding and a false sense of connection because nothing is in person. And that really impacts the way that our kids are interacting. Of course, we have gangs. Gangs create this sense of belonging and family, and everybody's got to contribute and participate, whether that's drugs, whether that's theft, whether that is participating in what they say is consensual trafficking. There's no such thing. But all of that, there's this criminal network that operates oftentimes within gangs, and we see trafficking as a part of that. You also have strip clubs, escort services, erotic massages, all of those things, again, draw people who are willing to pay for these type of things. And I've already mentioned large events in public places. This is how it happens, meaning this is how targets are identified and grooming begins. And that grooming process is very real. So let's take a minute. We're going to spend some time talking about understanding the victim. And I want to be clear that when I use the term victim, I am talking about someone who is oftentimes not even really aware that this is the life that they're still in. Depending on who is working with them, if law enforcement's working with them, they are going to identify this child or this person as a victim because that's simply how they have to report it. If a hospital is working with this person, they're going to call it the patient. If a service provider is working with them, oftentimes they're going to call them the client or survivor. So those words are interchangeable. Just it's really based on the profession and the perspective of who's speaking. But one of the things that we know about these kids for present age that we serve, I don't know if I mentioned that specifically, but present age only works with 17 years old and younger. And so that is our sweet spot, if you will. But what we know is it's estimated that 70 to 90% of sexually exploited children, those that have been trafficked, have a history of sexual abuse. And it's so important to understand that because it really is what creates the foundation of vulnerability. Trust has been violated, boundaries are this confusing concept. Attachment has been really difficult with relationships. And so that creates a perfect storm for a trafficker to manipulate. And we just need to understand that. On average, recent data shows us that on average, the victim when entering the life is 13 years old. I have the privilege of releasing a data report every year for the task force, and I'll make sure you know how to get that at the end of the presentation. But last year alone in 2023, that average age was 13. And so I hope that shocks some of you because I think we can also have this misconception that it's much older. If the average age is 13, that means we also have really young kids involved. One of the things that's good to point out, especially in North Carolina, is that the age of consent is 16 to engage in consensual sex. And so when we look at data of the victims that we're identifying in this city and around this region, the 60% are 15 years old and younger. So really the significant chunk of our kids are young and are getting younger. And it's just really important for us to note that. And life expectancy, this is national data. We don't really know how to pinpoint this specifically, but life expectancy after becoming involved in sex trafficking is 7 years. And what that means is that person is probably going to end up really addicted and have substance abuse issues that could lead to overdoses. They could potentially get murdered or be involved in violent crimes or suicide because this gets so intense that they really just are looking for any escape in any way out. So what are some warning signs? I want to give you just a few minutes. I'm not going to read all of these individually, but I'm going to give you a minute to read through them, and then I'll touch on a few of them. One of the things that we see, especially with our minors, so those that are 17 years old or younger, is eventually school is going to be impacted. There's no way that they are going to be able to stay under the demands of their trafficker and maintain school at a level that was consistent for them. So if there was already school issues or school problems, then that might be a harder place to find an indicator. But that is something that we do see as school truancy becomes a problem, grades start slipping, they start missing school. That becomes a very common thing that we see. They also oftentimes start to have a lot of things, clothes, jewelry, shoes, that doesn't match with the way that their life has presented before. So all of a sudden they have these things, and when you ask them where, they're like, oh, my boyfriend gave it to me, or oh, I have this friend, and they want it. And so it's important to recognize that some of this has to be in context with relationship to the person, because trafficking is so manipulative, it's hard to like spot it if you're just walking around the mall, for example. But there are times where you can do that as well. Older boyfriends is a big deal. That is how we see, it's one of the most common tactics that we see here in the Charlotte metro region is boyfriending or friending even, because we have had times where females have been recruited by a trafficker who once were a victim and now have been put in a position to recruit on behalf of that trafficker. And so it doesn't have to just be the male presenting. It could be female to female, male to female, female to male. So, but most common is male to female. I don't have specific stats on that, but that is what we see as most common. Frequent use of social media. Again, I would say 99% of the clients that we've worked with interacted with their trafficker or trafficking through online means. It is what we have to make sure that we're safeguarding our kids, our families, people that we care about, because it is the most common way, especially for kiddos, to be trafficked or even sold. So as we continue, I just want to really kind of land here for a minute. Would you know what it looks like? One of our survivors said, it's not a choice. No one just wakes up and wants to do this. You can't just walk away. And so it really becomes a mind shift for us, because we get asked all the time. We work closely with law enforcement. We do training with them in partnership with investigators and things like that. And one of the things that I tell them all the time, oftentimes when you have other crimes, you have someone who wants to report that this thing has happened. But when you're working with a child who doesn't recognize that what is happening to them is even wrong, let alone a crime, that can create a very different, complex situation. And that's what we find ourselves dealing and navigating with often. We will have professionals, social workers, court personnel, things that Department of Youth and Family Services, Atrium Healthcare, emergency room workers go, something's not right. And it's because they've been educated that they're able to identify, like, I think that this person might be a victim of trafficking. And it's only as you start journeying and walking with that person and asking the right questions, professionals like myself and others in this field, that you go, wait, yeah, we can confirm that this is a case of trafficking. So I also just want you to know that there isn't this list that I can say, if these 3 things are happening, you know this person is being trafficked, and you should definitely step in. It's unfortunately a lot more complicated than that, which is why it can go so undetected for oftentimes so many times. So I want to just pivot for just a minute and let you know how you can connect with us. And then I'm going to open it up for time for questions. That usually gets to be pretty conversational. And so be getting your questions and your thoughts ready. But I do want you to know, if this is resonating deep within you and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to get involved. We do have a pretty extensive volunteer need, but also process. And we have an upcoming volunteer training that is coming up on March. Oh goodness, is it 2nd or 3rd? The first Saturday. Hold on a second. Let me pull it up. It's the first Saturday in March. I believe it's the 2nd. So if you are interested in, yes, March 2nd, I'm going to give you contact information in just a minute. We'd love to get you connected. There is a video that you will watch before on your own time, really just that goes in way more depth about what trafficking is than I'm able to here. But also, what are the pathways that I could even volunteer with Present Age with? So we would love to get you connected to that. Maybe you're like, I don't have time, or I'm already involved in other things, but this issue is really important to me. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we operate off of the giving of people just like you. And last year we saw a 70% increase in 1 year. It was probably the most exhausting and overwhelming year, and I've been doing this 15 years. And we really just expect that to continue, but there's no grid for us to know how to prepare for how much. And so with every client above and beyond what we anticipate, we have to then match and find funds. We don't charge the clients or the families that we serve any amount of money. And so that is an opportunity for you to sow into the work of changing the lives of young girls in this area. And then go. I don't really talk about this, especially at a local level, but one of the things that we do is we actually have international projects, Nicaragua, Kenya, and Thailand. And so there are opportunities also, if you want to see this internationally, where you are able to go with Present Age on a trip to serve and work with the trafficking efforts in other countries. So with that, I'm going to give you guys contact information. Here's our website. It has a plethora of resources and information that you can access. You can, if you're interested in volunteering, you can send an email at info@presentageministries.org and just put interested in volunteering, and we'll get you connected and get you to the right place so that you can begin that process. And if nothing else, guys, could you go follow us on social media, share about what you learned tonight, tag us in it, and really just help us expand our network of people who are aware that not only that human trafficking is an issue, but that Present Age is here, vetted in the community to serve the needs of minor victims. With that, I'm going to take a breath. You think about the questions you want to ask, and I want to give you guys, Lachelle, do you want to navigate this section, or how would you like to do it?
I guess we can do a little bit of both, tag team, to make sure we reach everyone.
Great.
I did notice a question in the beginning of your speech, which was good, by the way. Thank you so much. It was very informative. I learned quite a bit. It asked about Cabarrus County schools. Did you say that there was a curriculum in Cabarrus County schools for school-age children?
Yes, so absolutely. So we were contracted and partnered with Cabarrus County Schools, and we launched, it's called a Child's Choice. That's the K-5 curriculum. And it is about what is appropriate and inappropriate touch, and really teaching kids to learn that they get to say no. So whether it is that peer on the playground that's messing with their hair and they don't like that, you can tell them, like, no, thank you, please. I don't like you doing that. Or the inappropriate touch by a family member or a cousin or whoever, and how to find your voice to say that is uncomfortable and you don't like that. So that's K-5. And then we are finalizing middle school 6-8 curriculum. It's called The Illusion of Love. And it is all about human trafficking in accordance to Senate Bill 279 that we are launching that. And these are all Train the Trainer. We have trained Cabarrus County Schools. We trained close to 60 people, administrators, educators, teachers, social workers, psychologists, so that they can roll this out and be prepared and equipped if there are disclosures. So so if you have kids in Cabarrus County Schools, then you know that the content and the material is trustworthy. It was put together by experts. And not only by experts, but we actually had survivors who worked on that project with us. Like, what do you wish somebody would have told you? Or what vocabulary do you wish you would have had when you were 7, when you were 11, when you were 14, so that we can really hopefully empower these kids to know who and how to talk to about this if there is a problem and there's an issue.
Thank you. Leading up to that, another question I have. So for the high school students, because unfortunately, some of them are 18. So what would you do in that scenario? You guys really can't help them, or you refer them?
No, we definitely do. We have close partnerships with agencies that work with adults. So we would get involved and make sure that there is a soft handoff and make sure that they have the support that they need. We just don't provide the services directly. Just because of the legalities of mixing ages and things like that. But yes, we would absolutely make sure that they got connected to the appropriate services based on what that they need in where they're at in the community and things like that.
Okay. I think there's a question that popped up in the chat.
I just was reading that. Is there a difference in female versus male when it comes to their approach to children? Also, when you mention clients, does client include individuals? Great question. I would say yes, there's a little bit of a different approach in male versus female in terms of how they recruit. But the avenues are the same, if that makes sense. So when they're recruiting females, a lot of times it is really based on, for all ages, especially kids, they want to be accepted and they want to know that they matter, right? They want to be loved. And so really it's figuring out, how do I exploit that need? And that presents differently in males and females. And so that is something that we have seen happen. When it comes to clients, we have a family-based model of support that we wrap around in our continuum of care for our clients. So whether that child is living with biological family, a kinship family, or a foster family, we're able to provide services in those settings, even to the extent of providing services in group homes, if the group home isn't trafficking specific, that we can provide specialized services based on that child having needs because of their trafficking experience. So we are working at a very, I, Hannah Arrowood, work at a very macro level at task force, but my staff and my team are at a micro level working individual cases. We have social workers, case managers. We work with a wide variety of trauma-informed counselors across the city that really provide different types of modalities for our girls when it comes to their therapeutic needs and services that they have. And so it's both and for us at Present Age. Thank you for that question.
And another one came in.
Okay. In your 15 years of helping, has the last few years been increased trafficking activities or just the same average? No, we've definitely seen an increase. I will put in this chat. Give me a minute. I don't want to talk and type at the same time because it won't come out right. So that website that I just put in there is to the task force, and that's where we publish our annual report. So if you go to charlottehttf.org, you can go up there. It says data reports, and you can go look at the last 4 years of data. We've definitely seen an increase. Like I said, from 2022 to 2023 was 77% increase. I don't necessarily think it's because the problem is just that drastically worse. I think it's because we're spending intentional effort and time doing things like this, educating and training. And because we're doing that, there's a higher rate of identification, which is good. But there's just really no way for us to know, is it also getting worse and we're increasing identification, or is it just one or the other? But we definitely are seeing an increase for sure.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay. Thank you so much, Hannah. We really, really appreciate it.
welcome.
Very, very informative. We'll be reaching out to you again.
Absolutely. I know it's a lot of information to take in. It's like drinking from a water hose. So I encourage you just to process it, let it sink in. As I mentioned, if you guys ever want any information, or if you are curious or just have questions, feel free to reach out. And like I said, we'll get you connected to the people. If I'm not the right person or my team isn't, we'll definitely get you to where you need to go. But I appreciate you all taking time to listen to me chat to you tonight.
Thank you so much. And everyone, we put a survey in the chat. So if you didn't mind to take the time to just fill out the survey to let us know how we did, how we can improve, or if you liked it, any comments, good, bad, and ugly, we'd appreciate them so much. And I think that's everything that we have. So we appreciate you attending. And thank you all so much.